A Shalom Akim Shalom Shalom, giving all honor, all praises and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim. Listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Araquai. I can hear with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I kind of just wanted to go through some exhortation in regards to de-escalation and something that something that I had experienced in regards to noticing and some observation basically on how as we see certain things going on within the society. These people tend to be essentially very on edge. They tend to have a mind frame of wanting to crash out. They're very angry. They're very on basically on edge. Like they're essentially they're just like a ticking time bomb, ready to kind of pop off, right? So that being said, I just thought I would do a little bit of exhortation in regards to some of the things that King Solomon spoke of, in regards to de-escalation, tactics. Because as a people, especially a lot of our men, they don't actually possess a lot of these different skills. And the scriptures talk about all the time, how wisdom really and truly is the principal thing. And a lot of our people, they get hemmed up into terrible situations because there is a lack of emotional control, because they weren't actually taught these skills, because they come from a family structure, predominantly single mother households that are completely broken. It's not just about having both parents, but they weren't actually taught the skills to be able to utilize them when they're actually in situations where they can actually preserve their own life, right? So I just thought I would just touch on a couple precepts here and there. I won't make this too long, but I sincerely hope that this lesson really truly is edifying. So before I go to the first precept, I'm just going to type in what is de-escalation. So this is de-escalation. So de-escalation is the process of reducing the intensity of a conflict or crisis using communication and other techniques to calm a situation, to prevent it from turning violent or harmful, often by building trust, showing empathy, maintaining calm, and setting boundaries. It's a skill set used across various fields like healthcare, law enforcement, and education to help people in distress diffuse tension and move forward to a peaceful resolution, right? So really and truly, it's a technique that's used in a very, a lot of these high intense, high demanding, high stressful jobs, that require like a lot of emotional control. They use a lot of these different tactics, but the same tactics, a lot of these things that King Solomon actually spoke about in the book of Proverbs. And I want to get a couple examples, right? And it shows you the importance of these things, especially in these times too, because a lot of these people are very, they're ready to crash out, what I'm saying? Like, and that's a very common sentiment that you see within especially a lot of our like young men, specifically, right? So here it says core principles also include, it says active listening, paying attention to verbal and nonverbal cues. It says empathy, calm communication, non-threatening body language, maintaining a safe distance, self-awareness, right? So essentially to be, circumspect, problem focus, so steering conversations towards solutions rather than focusing on attacks, right? And here it says, just the edification, it says breathing exercises, slow controlled breaths, you know um, providing space, so giving people a space to essentially cool down, offering choices, setting boundaries, and seeking help, right? So it just these are just very important tactics to essentially, we're using these things to essentially preserve our souls, right? Because Yahweh Shai said that we're sheep in the midst of wolves, right? So we have to be what? Wise as serpents, right? So the serpent is a very subtle animal. It gives, sometimes it has to be able to watch. Sometimes it would stay lurking in the bushes, being able to watch its prey, and not always strike right away. And sometimes there's no need to strike, right? And when you think about it, in I guess a worldly sense, even law enforcement, it would look bad. For example, like a police officer would try, and in every situation they got called into, their only weapon is their gun, right? And that would look essentially really bad if every situation they were called into, because not every situation actually requires that. Sometimes other weapons are using, their peaceful words, and that's something I'm going to get, right? So without further ado, so I'm going to get this here. This is Proverbs chapter 25, verse 15, and it says, by patience and a calm spirit a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft and gentle tongue breaketh the bone of resistance, right? So it shows the importance of having, using, speech, and how, you say certain things too, because, we're living in some times where people are like, they're ready to, they're very on edge, right? Because, they're facing economic stress. They bought into American dream, which they realize is a complete nonsense. They're being taxed, and a lot of these people, they actually, and then they're taking a lot of this information without actually having a filtering mechanism, right? So they might they go to, their job, they hate their life, they hate their wife, they hate they hate certain aspects of themselves, they don't deal with themselves, and they're essentially, for them, there is no separation between spirit and flesh, right? There's no mindset of like, okay, let me cut back on actually taking in too much of this information, let me cut back on trying to manage my anger, and so on and so forth. These things are not actually, discussed, because for them there is a very, the spirit and the flesh are basically kind of just one. There is no separation, there is no harness trying to bridle, certain types of behaviors that they may have, because they believe that they are the vehicles that they are in, right? So I'll read this again, and it says that by patience and a calm spirit a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft and gentle tongue breaketh the bone of resistance, right? So the soft, response is able to actually quell certain situations. As a matter of fact, so to quell essentially means to put an end to rebellion or other disorder, typically using by force, right? So we're just, it's just a de-escalation tactic, right? It's not meant to, we're not, we're not tough guys. Let me go to Proverbs. This is Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1, and it says, a soft answer and a gentle, a soft and gentle and thoughtful answer turns away wrath, but harsh and painless and careless words stir up anger. Right? Let me get that in the KJV. And it says, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Right? So it shows you the power, of a soft answer, right? And even this is something even a lot of our women can actually even apply as well, because a lot of our women, they tend to have a very masculine type of mind frame, right? So if your man is in, essentially is in distress, don't provoke him, but use a soft answer to be able. That's part of understanding. That's part of your superpower. But a lot of our women don't actually even know and understand the importance and the value, in that soft answer, and how much that can help diffuse certain situations, right? But the point is, going back really to the title, is helping, because I've been in situations where, people, they're very stirred up in the spirit, and the one of the best tactics is to be able, this precept I'm reading, as I'm reading it, it came so much in handy, being in those particular situations, to be able to, help bring the situation to, when the tension is high, help to bring it to a minimum, so a certain level of discourse can be established, because it's hard to speak to people when they're very tense, so it's just to get them onto a level, a heavy, a lower playing ground, so to speak, right? Not to essentially match the energy that they're giving off, right? So go here. This is Matthew chapter 24, verse 12, and it says, "And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold," right? So this is the kind of mind frame, this is the not the mind frame, I should say, but this is the type of environment, that we're living in, wars, rumors of wars, and then people are just very, they don't have much to lose. So essentially, when they don't have much to lose, they tend to lose it, right? Because they're, they invested in a burning house, right? So let me just, I guess I'll get this last one here in the Wisdom of Solomon. One second. This is Wisdom of Solomon 6 and 13, and it says, she preventeth them that desire her, in making herself first known unto them. Whoso seeketh her early shall have no great travail, and he that find her sitting at his doors, right? So this is speaking of the importance of wisdom here, because that's really the point, is to be preserved from these, these sorts of situations, right? Because these things will happen. You encounter some people, whether it might be on the day to day, on the in public, what I'm saying, like these things actually help, because a lot of these building blocks, a lot of our people haven't been properly taught on how to actually manage their own situations, because their solution basically is to get, to ready to throw fist, and ready to pull out the clip and just empty the clip. That's the type of mindset of a typical young Jake, as opposed to, having essentially a calm spirit to be able to quell those certain kinds of situations, right? Because they're essentially, a lot of them are products of bad nurturing and a bad environment. They saw bad templates of how to resolve certain conflicts using bad tactics. So what do? They take on those tactics and thinking that they're right, and then they get hemmed up in certain situations, either maybe with dealing with teachers or authority or whoever, and it causes them to, fall by the edge of the sword, or it causes them to go to the grave, right? So it's just about preventing us from those kinds of situations. I'll read verse 16 here, and it says, "And she goeth about seeking such as are worthy of her, showeth herself favorably unto them in her ways, and meeteth them in every thought," right? So this is just the importance, of having that, that wisdom. And in those situations, the Lord would feed us with certain, information in certain situations, right? So, that's pretty much, the point I kind of just wanted to hit, in regards to de-escalation. This is something that's very important, that, as a nation of people, they have bad conflict resolution skills, right? So, um, hopefully, this lesson was quick, straight, and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.